Welcome to another episode of Toot Your Own Horn Music Matters. I am delighted to have Nancy Braithwaite with me today. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Lisa. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
What a special opportunity for me to get to chat with you about your journey in music. And it always begins the same way here. How did you find your instrument?
Well, I grew up in the Chicago area in the United States, in Barrington, Illinois, and in the fourth grade, we all played the tonet with our music teacher. That was sort of a little black recorder, a plastic thing. And I had piano lessons from when I was about 7, so I could read music and count and stuff. And so I was really very good at the tonet, which doesn't say very much. And then in 5th grade, everybody in our school at that time was allowed to choose a wind or a band or a orchestra instrument, and then we would have free instruction in groups at school. You're probably familiar with that. I don't know if we still have that in the United States, but when I was a girl, we did. And my mom wanted me to play the violin because her sister, Aunt Margaret, played the violin, but I didn't like Aunt Margaret very much. And well, I liked her, but I didn't like her violin playing. Let's put it that way. And it was cool to be in the band when you were in the Midwest. And so I chose the clarinet because it was black and looked like the tonet. I didn't know anything. So there I was with my clarinet, and I was in a group with a bunch of other girls, mostly girls, I think, played the clarinet at that time in my school. And I did that for a couple years, and I wasn't taking it seriously at all. I was just a normal kid playing outside, and that was just an extra activity, but I liked it, and I was doing fine. And after 6th grade, so I did that for 2 years in grade school, and then we moved to the middle school, and for some reason, I had forgot my clarinet in the 6th grade school. It was different school, completely different building, different location in the town. And I got to middle school, and I wanted to be in the band, but I didn't have my clarinet. And we had 2 bands, and I was put last year in the second band because I couldn't audition. We had auditions.
Mhm.
And I didn't like being last year all that much, but there was a girl next to me called Cherie who was mean to me. And every time I saw her when I passed through the hall at school, she'd say, your last chair. Well, I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
So when it was time for the Halloween parade, we had to march through our town for the Halloween parade with our marching music by memory. And then we had a chance to audition for a new place in the band. And I thought, I want to be at least second to last chair. I wasn't like trying to, I wanted that Cherie in the dust. I was just really fed up. So I remember still to this day marching around my parents' basement in Barrington, Illinois, practicing my marching music by memory, or whatever pieces we had to play in the Halloween parade, and the G major scale. I can still remember that. And of course, I had been playing the piano for quite some time, not very well, but anyway, I was determined. I really worked hard at getting that right. And so when I auditioned, I went up to second chair in the first band.
Oh, great.
I had not actually auditioned before, and I'm sure I wouldn't have done as well if I hadn't been mad at Cherie. But at that moment, I caught the attention of our band director, who was called David Shaw, and he played the trumpet and had gone to Northwestern University. And so he said, well, I think you have real talent. And he arranged for me, even though I was too young, to go that next summer to Northwestern University summer music program, which was, I don't remember, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in the summer for high school kids. And John Painter was the conductor of the band, and I played under him. And Jerry Stoll was teaching clarinet. Now, mind you, I'd never had an individual clarinet lesson in my life until that time.
Wow.
I just had 2 years of grade school group lessons, right? And then junior high, I didn't have a teacher. But I went after 7th grade, between 7th and 8th grade, I went to Northwestern, and I remember I played duets with Jerry Stoll in those lessons. And I thought it was wonderful. I loved it. And he said to me, I want you to come and study with me privately. So my parents were willing to do that, and I would take the train to Chicago on Saturday mornings very early and have my lessons down at 410 South Michigan Avenue near the Art Institute. Being from Chicago, that probably means something to you too.
For sure. And Jerry still, of course, played in the Chicago Symphony.
That's right. He was assistant principal clarinet and E-flat clarinet in the Chicago Symphony at Northwestern University, and he was a very wonderful man. And
Lucky you. I never got to meet him. Lucky you. That's awesome.
I was lucky. So I studied with him from 8th grade through all of high school. And I went to that summer music camp at Northwestern again after 8th grade. And then after my freshman year in high school, I started going to Interlaken. So I went to Interlaken summer camp for 8 weeks for 3 summers, and I lived for Interlaken. I loved it.
We have that in common. I went only for 1 summer, and then I went to the academy.
I read you went to the academy. Anyway, I adored Interlaken. I adored everything about Interlaken. I loved the clarinet, and I loved making music, and I loved being part of the orchestra and the band there and all the other arts kids. I really felt like I was at my home there. And I begged to go to the Arts Academy, but my parents said no, that I was not going to go to the Arts Academy. So anyway, then I finished high school, and I went and I auditioned at various schools, and I got in, and I went to Eastman. And
who was teaching you at Eastman there?
Stanley Hasty.
Stanley Hasty, of course. Yes.
And I loved Stanley Hasty, and it was a wonderful, wonderful school. And because I had very good instruction with Jerry Stoll, I was welcomed with open arms at Eastman. So I had a really very positive experience there, playing in the orchestras and the wind ensemble and chamber music, and that was great.
Stanley Hasty had because I know so many people who have studied with him, because I, of course, went to Northwestern and was a Marcellus student, and people who study with Hasty have such great stories of how kind he was and how helpful, and very different personality than Robert Marcellus. And yeah.
He taught Larry Combs, he taught Elsa Verdier, he taught Peter Hadcock, who had a really wonderful. Those people were before my time. I also studied with Larry Combs in the summers.
Mm-hmm.
I was when he was playing in the Chicago Symphony, and since I'm from the Chicago area, when I was home, and then and I got a performance certificate at Eastman, which I was quite proud of. And then I went and studied with Robert Marcellus for a master's. As you say, Robert Marcellus was a very different person than Stanley Hasty, but also a wonderful, wonderful man. And I should have had a 2-year master's, but at the end of the summer between my first and second year at Northwestern, I auditioned for the Savannah Symphony. I got the job of principal clarinet. So I thought, well, I'm going to go get for the job, because there's not very many jobs for principal clarinet available anywhere.
Wow.
I did that, and that was the end of my studying. I did have some lessons with Robert Marcellus again when I came back to visit my parents, but basically I never got my master's because I got the job. And I had a wonderful time in Savannah. We had a great wind section. The strings were there was less depth in the string section, but there were, like, the principal oboe player was from Curtis, and he went on to get principal oboe in Utah Symphony, and the bassoon, principal bassoon, for a large part of my time there, went on to be assistant principal in Cleveland. So we had a really good wind section. And
Savannah has always felt to me a little like I got to sub a little in Buffalo. Like, it's always a stepping stone orchestra. People from there go places.
Exactly. It's a stepping stone orchestra. And we had, when I got the job, there were always a gazillion people auditioning, but I was fortunate at that time that the conductor was a man called George Troutline, a wonderful man. And he had played violin in the first violins of the Cleveland Orchestra. So he liked the Marcellus sound and approach. So that gave me, I think that helped me get the job, that I had been studying with Marcellus, and he could notice that. And then he left and went, I think, somewhere in Arizona. But then we had a conductor for my other 5 years there. I stayed there 6 years, called Christian Badia. Um, was also the music director of the Spoleto Festival. So he took me, well, I had to audition, but I would say gave me an in. I went 3 years to the Spoleto Festival, along with some of the other winds of Savannah, and that was great too. And Christian Badia let me solo with the orchestra every year that he got to play a concerto with the orchestra, and we also did some opera then, and we did a lot of chamber music. So it was a great job because the orchestra didn't have a summer season, so you could go to festivals and things in the summer, and we didn't have a season of a concert every week, so there was a lot of chance to play chamber music, and I had a great time, met a lot of wonderful friends, and it's a beautiful city, but it wasn't where I wanted to stay. I didn't feel I grew up, of course, I was born in Connecticut, but grew up in the North, and I didn't feel like I would want to have a family and live in the South. That was not my place. Various reasons. It was also a very racist atmosphere at that time. I hope it's changed.
And you were a woman in a principal chair, which is, I mean, to this day, people struggle to be in that position. It's very difficult to win those jobs and very difficult for women to be in those spots. So that's even more amazing given the day.
Well, actually, I mean, I agree with you. That's true, but I had never thought about being a woman being particularly unusual. As I said at the beginning of my story, all the people in my grade school that did clarinet were girls. So it was like, I felt like a girl's instrument to me as a kid. And when I was in Interlochen and high school band and Eastman, there were lots of women in my class, in the classes where I was by no means an exception in educational background. And I never had a feeling also playing in Savannah that being a woman was a detrimental situation. The second clarinet was also a woman, but absolutely true that there's not that very, very many of us. And so after, then I auditioned for Tanglewood, and I was accepted to go in the summer of 81. I had been in Spoleto in 78, 79, and 80. And in between, before I went to Spoleto, I also went to a place in Hancock, Maine, which was absolutely wonderful, the Pierre Domain School, and the Pierre Montour Domain School was called. And Pierre Montour had started it, and his daughter, Nancy Montour, was running it when I was there. And it was an orchestra place for conductors, and there was this wonderful French guy called Charles Bruck who was teaching the conductors, and also we played chamber music, and we lived on the sea in these big mansions that people, that was like their summer houses, but they put the students up in, and
Nice.
it was just amazing. So I went there, so I got to do stuff in the summers, and then I got in Tanglewood and in 81. And when I was in Tanglewood, for those 8 weeks, well, it was great, of course, with, all Bernstein conducting and Kurt Mazur and Seiji Ozawa and,
Wow.
well, just Andre Previn. Anyway, it was wonderful. But I met a Dutchman there, and he was studying conducting there's as you know, a fellowship orchestra, and then also a conducting program for international young people. And anyway, I fell in love with this Dutchman and vice versa. And he was going back to the Netherlands, and I was going back to Savannah. And we wrote back and forth, and I visited for Christmas. And then the following summer, I had decided that just for a good challenge, I would go to the ARD competition in September. The season in Savannah didn't start that early, I think October or something. And Anna, that was the Dutch conductor's name, Anna Wiertsma. So I was at home the summer of 82, studying with Larry Combs and preparing for the ARD competition. When you're in Savannah, you don't have an opportunity to study with anybody. You're it. And and there's nobody, like Atlanta's a 5-hour drive, and I was only 23 when I went to Savannah, so I didn't feel like I was done studying. I really had a desire to learn more, so I would had lessons with Larry Combs or Robert Marcellus when I went to Chicago, but Marcellus wasn't there that summer. Maybe he had already passed away. I can't remember.
No, he was going blind during around that time. So, or he was blind. It was in that vicinity, and so his health was definitely shaky, and he may not have been taking a ton of private students because of his health.
No, but I studied with Larry Combs anyway. That was great. And then Anna was the assistant conductor of a choir, a student choir in Utrecht in the Netherlands, and it was a year of some kind of festivities, like so many years of Dutch-American friendship, quite a lot of years. I don't know, like around 50 and the choir was coming on tour, and then the conductor had a heart attack and couldn't go. So Anna was asked to conduct. So all of a sudden he was coming on tour to Chicago, and I was in Chicago. So this was my long distance love relationship. So I was thrilled. And I said, well, why don't you come and stay at my parents after your tour? And I went to some concerts and he stayed. And then after that, we decided that I would leave Savannah with a year's leave of absence and come and study in the Netherlands after I went to the ARD competition. I was already going to Europe, and I really felt like I wanted to develop more, and I wanted to get to know him without a long distance relationship because, well, that you can't really tell that much. So that's what I did. I came and I studied in the Netherlands. I did a chamber music degree and a clarinet degree and in Utrecht with this wonderful chamber music teacher called Ellie Goren, who was originally from Vienna and left with the Nazi regime and gone to England and had started the Allegri Quartet and was the concertmaster of the BBC orchestra. And he had suddenly had a Dutch wife and was teaching in the Netherlands. So that was really fabulous. And after that, I studied some more with a Belgian man called Walter Boykins. I stayed in the Netherlands with my Dutch boyfriend, and we got married and we bought a house together.
And so at this point, you're working enough that you let Atlanta go, basically.
I let Savannah go.
I mean, Savannah go.
I didn't go back. That was just a sort of fallback thing, but I wasn't working that much. My parents were helping me. I was studying. And actually, I had never finished my studies. I had worked in Savannah, but fortunately, my parents were helping me. Otherwise, I couldn't have done it. And Anna was also working, but I didn't want to be dependent on him in that period. So then I also went to study with this very fine Belgian soloist called Walter Boykins. Made a whole lot of recordings of chamber music. Walter Boykins was teaching in Rotterdam and Antwerp at that time, but I had a Dutch degree, so I signed up in Antwerp in Belgium. And after a year with him, he said, well, you're a very fine player, and I need an assistant in Rotterdam. Would you like to come and teach with me? And so I have a job teaching at the conservatory. And I said, well, first I was like, I don't know. But then I thought, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So I became his assistant. And then after a couple of years, then I was promoted to being a fellow professor, but we worked with the same class. He was teaching with the French system where he would come and give a master class, but he didn't actually give the individual lessons. He did that at like several conservatories, 3, I think. So he wasn't all that present at the school. He would come in like once every couple weeks for a half of a day or a day, and he would have all these students and they would come and listen to each other and play, but nobody actually played that much for him. But I was their actual weekly teacher. That was this setup in that system. And but you learn an awful lot in a class like that. You learn a lot. It's not a bad system at all, but it's very different than the American experience generally.
How did you adapt to, because the styles of playing and the sound concepts, were they they're fairly different.
Well, I forgot to mention one thing. When I was studying in Utrecht, chamber music and clarinet, in the Netherlands, this is a dumb thing I forgot to mention. It's an important thing. At that time in the orchestras, all of the clarinetists had to play this hybrid instrument with a German Wurlitzer bore, but a Böhm finger system. That was like practically the only country in the world that had that. And if you didn't play that, you could not be in an orchestra. So, and my teacher in Utrecht, when actually backing up, when I played in the ARD competition, I got into the semifinals. And at that time, there was also a Dutch player in the semifinals, and her teacher came to listen, and he was teaching in Utrecht and Amsterdam, and he accepted me into his class. So I was studying with him, but he played this hybrid system. He was principal clarinet of a Dutch orchestra. And so I went over to it, and I was...
And it was a Wurlitzer instrument.
It was a Wurlitzer, but with Böhm fingering system.
Right. Right. And I know this because at one point I tried to sell that instrument or something similar that Wurlitzer made here in the US, and it didn't have enough traction. But I know that instrument.
Well, I stayed on it for maybe 3 years or something like that, and I was just not comfortable. It wasn't it didn't sound I wanted. It was just like not me. And I was subbing in orchestras when I was doing it, so I was getting work, but I was not comfortable. And then I was, well, as I mentioned, Walter Bruinkens, I forgot to put in this part of the story. This is how it all came about. Walter Bruinkens played with a pianist a lot called Jan Krauthausen, a Dutch pianist. And I needed to give some recitals, I forget where, but I had quite a lot of repertoire. And so someone said, well, why don't you ask Jan Krauthausen? He knows all the clarinet repertoire. So I did. We played together. I was playing the Wurlitzer, and he said, I don't think that's your clarinet. And he said, why don't you still have a buffet? And I said, well, I do. And he said, well, I'd like to hear that. And so I came, and it was like, oh, thank God, this is so much. I felt so much more up. So then he said, well, why don't you go study with Walter Bruinkens and get your French clarinet playing feeling back with a teacher that does that, because none of the teachers in the Netherlands did.
Right.
And Bruinkens was Belgian. So in Belgium, they do play French clarinets. So anyway, that was how I happened to connect to Walter Bruinkens and how I happened to get the job in Rotterdam. And then when Walter Bruinkens retired, he was, of course, a good bit older than I was. Then I took over his class. So I taught in Rotterdam until just into the COVID period. And then here I had to retire. They have a retirement age, and that conservatory followed that rule. So anyway, that was really an exciting place to work, very international school. I taught chamber music and clarinet there, and I usually had like 11 chamber music ensembles per year, and a clarinet, maybe like 12, 15 clarinet students. So it was a very exciting job, and most of my students, because I taught French clarinet, were international students, Spanish, Italian, Japanese, Scandinavian, English.
How fun.
So yeah, it was great. And the whole school is very international, maybe 60% international. So I really enjoyed that job. And in the meantime, I was married to my Dutch husband, and I have 2 children. They grew up here. My daughter is a very excellent violinist, and she's the first violinist of a string quartet that won the ARD competition a couple years ago, called the Barbican Quartet. So she has a lot of work with them, and she's a mother now. Her baby's almost 14 months, so I'm a grandmother, which is very much fun. And
where do you live?
I live in Bunnik, which is a small village just outside of Utrecht. Utrecht is like the 4th biggest city in the Netherlands. But mind you, the Netherlands is very small. Like if I take the train to Rotterdam, that's 40 minutes from Utrecht. To Amsterdam, it's 25 minutes from Utrecht. To The Hague, it's also like 40 minutes. So it's Utrecht's right in the center of the country and the center of the rail hub. So if I play in an ensemble now, right? I play chamber music. I never joined an orchestra here. I I felt like my husband was a conductor. He's not living. He died in 2008 of cancer. And because he was a conductor, he had a schedule that was he was working primarily as a choir conductor,
Mhm.
and he had large amateur choirs, and 5 nights a week he would be gone. And because we wanted to have a family, I didn't feel like I wanted to be locked into an orchestra schedule.
Right.
And I had a teaching job, so I could make my own schedule with a teaching job. I could say, this week I'm there on Tuesday, this week I'm there on Friday, or I was actually there 3 days a week, but that gave me a lot of flexibility. And
Nancy, the Netherlands is just a remarkable place. I've been there just a few times and have really loved every minute there because it's so inclusive and
uh,
it's so art oriented, and they lead the way in terms of creative economy statistics, in terms of helping people around the world understand the value of music and art and culture. And you live in a remarkable area. I wish I could be where you are. I think it's awesome to live in
I'm
that.
very fortunate. And, it took me quite a while, if you've ever moved anywhere far away, to actually find your tribe.
Mhm.
It At first I was studying and then I was teaching, but I have always loved playing chamber music, and that's what I do now and have been doing for many, many years. And, I in my village, when my children were small, there was a festival, a chamber music festival in our village church. It was just a very beautiful church, I think built in like 1200s or something. And that was, all of a sudden I was pregnant with my second child, my son, and I saw a poster at my bank, James Campbell clarinet coming to play. Well, James Campbell was teacher at Indiana University,
Right.
a fine player. And I was like, "Huh? James Campbell in my village?" And there was this wonderful festival here every year, and I would go. It was like for, I don't know, 10 days, and he was part of the group. And it was an international group with a Dutch pianist organizing it called Rian de Waal. And then I thought, oh, this church is beautiful for chamber music, and that festival's only 10 days, but all year long there's nothing. So I started a chamber music series here, and I got a board of people together from the village that were music lovers. And well, next season's our 30th season, and that gave me a opportunity to perform and invite friends.
Mhm.
Well, I started that up with a few friends, the string players that live in the area. My husband was playing the piano, and now my daughter plays in it, and that gave me a chance to, as I said, hard to find your tribe, to build up a tribe. And now I play. That series is still going on, and we play there. But I also have a group called the Rietveld Ensemble, which is based in Utrecht, and we have a corps of players of violin. We have an English violinist who was the concertmaster of the Radio Philharmonic, and a violist who's American, who was principal viola of the Netherlands Chamber Orchestra, and also an American cellist. They all live in Utrecht, and he
Lovely.
anyway, so we have a sort of core of friends, and we have a series of 10 chamber music concerts during the season, once every month. And I'm the artistic director, and now, like right now, I'm busy contacting who wants to, what are we going to play? These are all different programs, or with different pianists or with singers. And so I've sort of made my own, a little bit like you. I'm an entrepreneur as far as um, having chamber music going on. And I just think, what do I want to do? I didn't want to be bored when my kids were little, and I was at home, I was breastfeeding them. And so I started the series in my little village, and now they're obviously all grown up, but that gave me the idea. Oh, you just think of what you want to do, and then you just do that.
Yeah.
So um, that's what I do. I play chamber music, and I play recitals sometimes with other teachers that from the conservatory where I taught. Or I've made a couple of CDs. One just came out last June. It's called well, first of all, I should say, my first CD, I had never made a CD until like something like 2000. 17 or 18, something
Oh
like
my gosh, I didn't know that. Wow, that's amazing.
And I had met, Savannah was very formative for me. And when I was in Savannah, I was playing in the orchestra. And one day, someone came backstage after the concert and introduced herself and said, "My name is Edith Hemingway, and I'm a composer, and I've recently moved to Savannah with my husband. And I really love your playing, and I'd like to write a piece for clarinet and piano for you. And I play piano. Would you like to do that with me?" I thought, "Oh, sure. Why not?" I always say yes.
Yes.
Yes is the good word. And then if you don't like it, you can always
Great.
see later. So I said, "Sure, sounds great." It was a fabulous piece and a wonderful person. Was like my mother's age. She just died a few years ago. And so she wrote that piece for me. It's called Asian Figures. And then there was a soprano that moved to town from New York, and then she wrote a trio for clarinet, soprano, and piano. When I moved to the Netherlands, she continued to write for me.
Boy.
Um, I took a course, so and she is just a wonderful person. She was married to an Episcopal minister and had 8 children, and was totally not like self-promoting. I had these manuscripts of these great pieces, a trio for clarinet, cello, and piano. Anyway, a piece for soprano, clarinet, cello, and piano. Whatever I asked her for, she'd write it for me. Wonderful pieces. And then I took a course maybe around 2016 or something online called Step into a Bigger Space for Women Artists of every discipline. And we did a lot of reading. You mentioned it at the beginning about women not often being in those positions, which I have not really thought about much, but I did think about through that course. What definitely was for me that I didn't really feel, like I said, I never made a CD. I didn't feel like this huge confidence about, doing something like that. Like, who would want to hear that, And I hadn't really, I didn't dare, basically. That was the bottom line. I didn't dare. I hadn't been calling me. But as part of that online course, maybe it was I don't know, some months that every so many weeks we would read and meet online and have assignments. And she had the assignment that you have to take the first step in a project that's exciting but a little bit scary, and that you will develop further. And I couldn't imagine what to do. I didn't have a clue. And while I was sitting there in front of my laptop at my table, just thinking about it, an email came in from a completely unknown clarinetist to me from the San Francisco area. That first piece that Edith Hemingway wrote for me, Asian Figures, said to Nancy Braithwaite, and that was the only piece that was published. And this woman had that music, and she saw to Nancy Braithwaite, and she found my email online, and she wrote me and said, "I've got this piece, and I would really like to ask you some questions about performing it." And then, so I wrote back, and I thought, that's what I should do. I should record those pieces by Edith Hemingway and get them published and try to
Promote it. Yeah.
promote her music, which is wonderful. And if I don't do it, it will just die.
Right.
She was at that time like around 90.
Wow.
And like no website, nobody else was doing anything. The music was mine. And so I wrote back to the woman and I said, "Be glad to help her, but I could better put her in touch with a composer," which I did. But that gave me the spark. So I decided that was my project, that I would try to record the works of Edith Hemingway on the chamber works. And she had also written some songs. And so I got a group together. I had no money, no experience how to do that. I had no clue, but I just put my head that I was going to do that. It was in my head. And so I was playing concerts all the time with this Rietveld ensemble. Mind you, we're not making money doing it. We're just
Yeah.
a little bit hard. It's not, I mean, you could not support yourself doing what I'm doing, but I had a teaching job. We all had other jobs, that we were making our money with. It's a group of friends that love to play and very good players. So I had a concert in The Hague in that period, and these fans would come and record our concerts. They had very good video equipment, and they had retired from their jobs, and that was their hobby. And so they came to all our concerts and recorded them with their video. And then they were taking me to the train. I was going to take the train home, and I told them about this project, just passing the time in the car. They asked me what I was up to, and I said, "Oh, I'm thinking about how to get this project going. I really want to make this CD, or my friend, this composer, blah, blah, blah." And that was that. And then about a half year later, my daughter that I mentioned that plays the violin was giving recitals throughout Europe. Also in the Netherlands, she had won some prize with piano. She was giving them, and some kind of like rising star program. And they went to hear her in the Netherlands. I had already heard the program a number of times, and it was sort of far away. And so then they went to hear her, and they like to be everyone's fan. And then she texted me on the way back, "Oh, these people are driving me home. Maybe we should invite them in for coffee when they come." So they came, and they came in, and so then this man, Dick was his name, said to me, "Well, how's it going with your project?" And I said, "Well, Dick, I don't have any money. I'm making CDs very expensive, so I'm going to have to crowdfund it. And it's such a big mountain. I'm just like sitting at the bottom of that mountain and looking at it, but I haven't taken the step. But somehow I'm going to have to." And then he looked at his wife and said, "What do you think, Marika?" And she nodded her head, said yes. And he said, "Well, we'd like to sponsor your CD. We have a foundation from our sister that died that we sponsor modern music. So we would like to fund your CD. Make a budget." I was like,
That's amazing. That's incredible.
it's just like meant to be.
Yes.
I was just like floored. So they said, you go ahead and crowdfund it. We'll put in like the first 5,000 euros, and then, see how much you can get, and what you don't get, we'll finish it off, but you make your CD. Well, so I crowdfunded half of it, and they paid the other half. It was very expensive.
Yeah.
That was my first CD, which was songs and chamber works of Edith Hemingway. And then when that came out, she came to the CD
Launch party. Yeah.
launch party. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And she came with two of her kids, and they stayed with me, and she loved the group, the two singers in the group, and cello and piano. The pianist is a friend of mine that I was at Eastman with, who lives here. And the cellist is principal cello of the Radio Philharmonic, and he's actually English originally. We're a bunch of, actually, the two singers were American because she wanted native speakers singing her songs. Anyway, so actually, one of the singers was my closest friend. She just passed away in October. A very fine American singer called Roberta Alexander, who was a big Met star, and I had first been married to Edo de Waart, and that's how she came to the Netherlands. But she also taught in Rotterdam, and so anyway, I asked her if she'd like to sing in the CD. But I also needed a very high soprano, and she didn't have that voice anymore because she was older. So she suggested another friend of hers, Clara McFadden, another very high soprano. And so I got these really fabulous singers, just top of the line. And everybody was in love with Edith Hemingway, and Edith Hemingway wrote more works for us after coming and meeting everybody. So then we had these more works, and I thought, well, we should record these too, but that wasn't enough for a whole CD. So then I thought, well, I could record a CD of works that had been written for me. Because more composers had written for me. I like to work with composers. So that's what I brought out in June, works by Dutch and American composers. And one of them is called Thomas Obo Lee. He lives in the Boston area, but he's originally Chinese. And when my sister got married in 96, he was a friend of hers. She lives in the Boston area. And he wrote a piece for her wedding. And that was for solo clarinet because I was there. So that's how I met him. And I played his piece, and he coached me the day before the wedding. And I was in a complete panic because it was a Brazilian chorus, which I had like no clue about. And he was like, "No, accent here and that." And can remember being up all night in the toilet while my kids were sleeping in the room with my husband practicing with, going through the piece in my head. And anyway, I got to know Thomas Oboli, and he's written like more than 10 pieces for me and my ensembles over the years. And next season in my series in my village, we're doing a retrospective of 5 of those pieces as our 30th thing. And he's written a new work for soprano and clarinet string trio. So anyway, one of his works, the first work he wrote for me after that, called Yo Picasso, is on my CD, and a solo piece my husband wrote for me. Some works by Edith Hemingway and another Dutch composer who wrote a piece for clarinet, violin, piano, and a Dutch composer who wrote a piece for clarinet and harp. So anyway, that's
really, really an interesting story. Wait, I have to go back though, way back, because you had no formal training. Your parents, you said was anyone in your family musical?
My grandfather played the harmonica by ear, and my mother could harmonize, singing beautifully. So musical, yes, but totally no musical background.
It was only your aunt that played the violin. That was
you can't call it playing the violin. She did not play the violin well. I don't believe she ever had very much formal training.
But more importantly, you didn't like her, so it didn't matter. Like you weren't.
I loved her, okay, but I hated her violin.
Okay. Yeah. So I just, for somebody listening who you didn't, I mean, a lot of the stories that I hear when something goes wrong, like they get last chair and the person picks on them like you described with the person who was 1 chair up from you, that will be enough to get them to quit. What was it in your background or upbringing that made you be defiant and actually wanted to hang in there?
That's a very good question. And I would put, my dad was a lawyer. He died.
Mine too.
And he always said that if he said no to something, but if I could give him enough good reasons why I should, that he would agree. So he taught me to argue. He taught me to stand up for myself, to think for myself, to speak up. That was very much encouraged by him.
But you didn't speak back to that girl. You just decided you were going to show up.
So that girl was actually not in my classes or something. She was just in the school and next to me in band. But no, I didn't speak back to her that I know of. I just despised her, and I just thought, I am so gonna put her in the dust. But my goal was second to last year, mind you. I wasn't thinking big. I wasn't thinking musical. I loved music, but I was not as you said, I didn't come from a musical background. I wasn't thinking about careers when I was in 7th grade. I was just a kid, Thank goodness for David Shaw, my band teacher, who recognized something which I had no inkling to, that sent me forth into a musical world. And my parents were very willing to support that. They allowed me to have lessons with Jerry Stoll. They paid for that. I could go to Chicago by myself every week. And then I was in the North Shore concert band all through high school. I would ride with the band teachers to
I played in there for a while too
So through high school, my best friend played the flute in high school, and she also went to Interlochen, and she was in the North Shore concert band too. And so, I mean, it was actually really thanks to the music program in Barrington, Illinois, that I was found.
That's what really turned the lights on, is that second audition when you were recognized as having skill or talent, and you then started to believe in yourself or believe that something was possible.
I think I would say it was when I went to Northwestern summer camp and I had lessons with Jerry Stoll, and I got and also played under John Painter in the summer band. I was in a musical community. I don't think I was thinking about possible when I was in the junior high band in second chair. I just thought fine, but the band teacher thought, wait, something should happen here. And but I really liked working with Jerry Stoll a lot. I liked the musical stimulation. I liked practicing. I still love practicing. I get up every morning and I think, nice day to practice the clarinet. My favorite day is a free day to practice, so that's that I always enjoyed. And he was someone who every week I had a new piece, and every week I had like new orchestra excerpts, and that was in the days when Carl Fisher Music Store was just downtown on Wabash Avenue. Would say, yeah, go over there and buy the Tomasi Concerto. Come next with the Martino Sonatina. I went through tons of repertoire. Don't ask how. And he would sing along to all the lessons. He would sing along, which gave me I feel very vocal about playing the clarinet, and I would attribute that to him, that he always sang along and told stories. And
Marcellus made us take voice lessons. Did he make you do that when you?
I never had. That's wonderful.
Yeah, he made us take voice lessons. We had to take 2 years of voice lessons if we wanted to get in his studio and stay in his studio. Yeah, it was hard. That was, talk about scary. I wasn't, I have a good voice, but I didn't think of myself as a singer, and so having to sustain that was definitely.
So is that Northwestern then, voice teachers? That's a big deal.
Yeah, it was definitely challenging. But I to this day, I do think that was probably one of the key things in helping me understand the vocalization of how you play and how to help others to play well, because it's so important that that the instrument and you sing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the bottom line. And who was teaching at Interlaken when you were there?
Frank Kowalski.
Okay.
You know the name Frank Kowalski? He won the Met audition and didn't take it, and stayed a teacher and was a superb player. My greatest problem personally was that he was not someone to tell you should go into music or tell you should do something. So I struggled because I was like, I loved music, but I needed someone to say, go try this.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't do that. So, but he taught me all my concepts of sound, and he set a really good baseline for me to be able to then study with Clark Brody, and then, Greg Smith and Robert Marcellus and Larry Combs, and the whole, I don't have all the names you have, but I have a good portion of them too, and it's like the masterful teachers. And that's really the key, isn't it? Is finding a teacher that really you respect and admire, and who can help you get to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a really important thing. So if somebody was listening to this and just amazed by your story, and they don't have music in their background, but maybe they would try, what would you tell them to do to play a wind instrument, to try to do it right now?
Someone that didn't play at all, like a young person or
an older person, someone who just, admires music and always thought it's not, I don't have a musical family, or I didn't go to school for music, or what would you started with the tonet, so it's clearly you just have to try, in my opinion. But what do you think they should have to do?
I totally think that studying music, playing a wind instrument, or playing any instrument, is something that enriches everyone's soul, basically, that and it engages you on so many levels. Like, I always feel when I've played, practicing or rehearsing or concert, that somehow it just sort of cleans you out. It's almost, this sounds weird, but it's almost like a meditation. You have to be concentrated on what you're doing. The rest of the world is not involved at that moment. It's a very creative thing. I would imagine that any kind of creative pursuit would have that, but I think for any human, that engaging in music or other arts, but for music for sure, is going to help you on many levels, because, well, say playing the clarinet, you have air, oxygen, you're breathing, which is in itself very calming is not always the right word, but healthy for you to have deep breathing. You're engaging physically with different parts, right and left, both hands, with your mouth, your tongue, your air coordination. You have to hear pitches. You have to audio eyes, or I don't know what the word is, but imagine your sound, the sound you want. You have to imagine sound colors. You have to engage with rhythm. Um, and you have to be able to physically produce it. So it's a really very all-encompassing activity that is particularly good for old people. Like I'm not young, I'm 72, but I still play a lot, and I don't think I've lost my level, but I think it keeps me vital and young. And also you have to learn. So you're learning new pieces, you're engaging in and learning the whole score. If you're playing together, you have to listen to each other. Just learning to listen to each other is something that probably is a positive thing in this day and age.
And staying present in the moment, it forces you, being fully present.
Absolutely. I mean, everything about playing music, I think, is absolutely fabulous. And they say that the kids, when they learn music, are much better at every other academic pursuit. That learning music is just the way to develop mentally and also emotionally, because music is, of course, art and feeling and expression, and just without words. And also, you can do it with anybody from any country.
Right.
When I first came to the Netherlands, I did not speak Dutch, and I started going to a Dutch course right away. But all those other people in my Dutch course couldn't engage in their field at their level because they didn't have the language. I had no problem. I could play with people from all over the world. So music is international. You can do it with Chinese. I've been to China 3 times teaching and playing, and you can do everything with everybody, even if you can't say a word. So I think music is beneficial for everyone at every level, whether you're talking about children in schools or you're talking about retired adult learners. I think it's absolutely a great way to keep mentally and physically and emotionally fit.
And despite Nancy talking about her incredible legacy of a history with music, she started with the tonette, and it just became what she chose, right? So, like, it doesn't have to be a fancy decision. Many people here have said, it was the picture on the wall, I like that shiny one, or whatever.
Although I do remember very clearly when I was second chair in my middle school band, the first chair was playing a Weber concertino, and I loved the sound of the clarinet too. And I find it personally absolutely fascinating how different people are drawn to the sounds of different instruments. It's just, I don't know why, but people feel it. My daughter, who plays the violin, when she was 1 year and 10 months old, we went to hear a little concert of other kids in our village playing the violin. And she said to me, "Mama, I want to play the violin." And every day she would sit in her sandbox and pretend to play with her little shovel and sand fork. And she begged to play the violin for a half year, and it's never stopped. She just heard that instrument. She thought, that's me. I can't explain why people are like that.
And it turns into lifetimes of pursuit, whether it's professional or just for fun. I mean, it's crazy when you think about one little thing that, it's amazing, really.
It really is. And I find, I play chamber music, and I find that when you play with other people, that you really reach the essence in a way. You're making music together. You're not talking, but you feel that person on a very direct, human, almost spiritual level. By making music together, you're bypassing all the other stuff, and it's just a very direct connection. And I find that it's a wonderful way to make friends. Also, that when you make music together, you build these kinds of connections, and that can be on an amateur level, young kids, going to summer camps, professionals. That's every level, really.
Yep. Nancy, I so appreciate you. I don't think I didn't know you were from Illinois and that I didn't know your background. I didn't know your dad was an attorney. We share that in common. I didn't know how many teachers we had in common, even, or it's very cool. I didn't even I thought you always lived in Europe. I didn't even realize.
I'm American for background. I have both nationalities now, but my mom still lives in Illinois. I'm going to visit. I go back now and then to
Well,
see.
let me know when you come. I would love to have you come by the shop or have coffee or have lunch with you. Or